When my sister Emily refused to call 911 while I clutched my chest in blinding pain, insisting I was overreacting, like always, something inside me broke harder than the pain in my ribs. I had grown up being the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who handled everything while she basked in attention, but I never imagined she would choose her pride over my life. And as I lay on the living room floor of our parents' house, because she insisted I stay with her for the weekend to help her with childcare, I realized this wasn't the first time she'd let me suffer for her convenience. She stood above me with her arms crossed, rolling her eyes, saying, "Get up, you're embarrassing yourself," while her kids watched from the hallway with wide, frightened eyes. I whispered, "Please, help me," and she scoffed, muttering something about how I always make everything dramatic. And then, because fate has a cruel sense of humor, it was her neighbor, not her, who finally called 911 after hearing me gasp for air through the open window. When the paramedics arrived and lifted me onto the stretcher, Emily launched into her usual performance, asking if I'd taken my anxiety meds, telling them I does this sometimes when she's stressed, forcing them to second-guess the urgency even as they saw my oxygen levels drop. At the hospital, when the doctor said I was close to a cardiac emergency triggered by severe inflammation, Emily dramatically covered her mouth and pretended she had no idea, though she'd spent an hour telling me I was faking it. I lay there watching her, watching how effortlessly she rewrote the script to make herself the misunderstood caretaker, and I realized this had always been her strategy: twist the truth fast enough that no one could keep up. The next day, she called our parents and told them I panicked and scared the kids. And by the time they arrived, I was once again the villain for daring to be sick. My father scolded me for putting unnecessary stress on the family. My mother told me I should have communicated better, and not one of them acknowledged the fact that Emily refused to call for help while I lay unable to breathe. As I stared at them, listening to their familiar tone, one that always asked me to shrink to keep the peace, I realized something terrifyingly clear. If I had died on that living room floor, they still would have found a way to blame me for it. So I decided, quietly, inwardly, without a single dramatic declaration, that I was done. Done protecting their version of me, done letting Emily decide when my pain was real, done sacrificing myself so she could continue being the center of the family universe. What I didn't know then was that life was already preparing the moment my silence would end. Not through anger, not through arguments, but through a truth I didn't even know existed yet, one held by the very doctor Emily dismissed, a truth that would echo through a will reading none of them saw coming.
Recovering at home wasn't peaceful. My phone buzzed constantly with my mother asking whether I had apologized to Emily yet, whether I had considered how embarrassing this was for her, and whether I understood how sensitive Emily was about being judged as a bad sister. Every call chipped away at my patience, and yet I said nothing because I already had a strange intuition that the story wasn't over, that the truth Emily thought she had buried would eventually claw its way out on its own. Weeks passed, my body strengthened, and I began noticing something small but undeniable. Emily avoided me, not out of guilt, but out of fear. Fear that I might tell someone the truth she'd tried so hard to spin. She didn't know the doctor had already documented everything, including the neighbor's statement that Emily refused help, or that he had added a note suggesting medical neglect. When our father had a sudden decline in his health, our family scrambled. Emily rehearsed speeches about being the responsible daughter, my mother clung to her tightly, and I stayed quiet, observing patterns I had missed all my life. At the hospital, while the doctor reviewed Dad's condition, Emily kept loudly emphasizing her role, telling staff she handled everything, and that I wasn't reliable in crises. But fate has a sharp sense of irony, because the attending physician that day was the same doctor who treated me, and the moment he recognized Emily, the shift in his expression was subtle but devastating. He greeted her politely, but with a professionalism that didn't give her the spotlight she craved. During the next few days, Dad's condition worsened, and with it came endless family meetings, ones where Emily made sure to speak first and last, pushing decisions that made her look strong and devoted. But she didn't know what Dad had done months earlier, quietly, secretly, after overhearing a conversation between Emily and my mother, where she'd called him a burden and complained about how exhausting it would be to take care of him. I didn't know either, not yet, but I knew something was off when Dad kept asking to talk to me privately, always when Emily stepped out, always with a seriousness I hadn't seen in him before. He told me things he'd never said out loud, how he knew Emily was the favorite child for years, how he regretted letting both of us grow up in such an unequal dynamic, and how he admired me for enduring without resentment, and how he feared the family was crushing me without ever noticing. The night he passed, Emily wailed dramatically, performing grief with the theatrical energy she brought to everything. But even in grief, she managed to blame me for not coming fast enough, for not staying overnight, for not doing more. And my mother repeated every accusation. Days later, when the lawyer contacted us for the will reading, Emily strutted into the office certain she'd walk out with everything: Dad's house, savings, land, control, power. And she was so convinced of her importance that she didn't even consider the possibility that Dad had seen her clearly, painfully, and had made decisions she wasn't prepared to face. I walked into the lawyer's office with no expectations, not because I didn't care, but because I had learned that expecting fairness from my family was a recipe for heartbreak. But as soon as I saw the doctor sitting in the corner, yes, that doctor, I felt something shift in the room, a tightening, a foreshadowing, like the moment before a storm breaks open. When the lawyer opened the will folder and cleared his throat, Emily leaned forward with the eager confidence of someone who believed her victory was guaranteed, but the first words out of his mouth sliced clean through her delusion. This will was amended 6 weeks ago in the presence of a physician and a witness, and Emily's head snapped toward the doctor, finally recognizing him as the same one she dismissed when I was hospitalized. Her face paled as he calmly confirmed he was there to provide clarity regarding a medical incident relevant to Mr. Hartley's decision-making. And Emily surged forward, sputtering, "What medical incident? What is he talking about?" But before she could unleash her usual manipulation, the lawyer continued reading. Dad had left her nothing but a single letter, sealed, stating he could not in good conscience entrust assets to someone who demonstrated consistent disregard for the safety and dignity of others, including family. And Emily gasped, shaking her head violently, insisting Dad would never say something like that. Yet the ink and legal signatures didn't bend to her denial. Then came my turn. The lawyer slid forward a folder far thicker than hers, and as he read Dad's message to me, tears blurred my vision. He thanked me for the quiet strength I had shown all my life, apologized for the years I was overlooked, acknowledged he had failed to protect me from the family's imbalance, and stated that when he learned from the doctor how Emily refused medical help when I was in distress, he realized the pattern he'd ignored for decades had escalated into danger. He wrote that he couldn't undo the past, but he could ensure my future was secure, leaving me the house, savings, and full authority over any family decisions regarding property. Emily erupted, screaming that the doctor lied, accusing me of manipulating Dad, accusing everyone of conspiring against her. But the doctor calmly opened his file and read the report aloud. How I arrived with life-threatening symptoms, how Emily insisted I was faking it despite medical evidence, how her neglect was witnessed and documented. With every sentence, her world collapsed. She lunged toward me, shouting that I ruined her life, but for the first time ever, my mother didn't defend her. She stared at her eldest daughter as if seeing her for the first time, horrified, ashamed, broken. When Emily stormed out of the office, slamming the door hard enough to shake the frame, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free, in a way I had never felt before. Later, as I stood outside, breathing air that felt new and clean, the doctor approached quietly and said, "People can hide cruelty for years, but the truth always waits for a moment like this." And in that moment, I realized that that was the real justice, not the inheritance, not Emily's downfall, but finally being seen, finally being believed, finally having the truth speak louder than her lies.